Welcome to another best wildcard team video ahead of game week 8. We do have confirmation that 7 games are going ahead and 3 games will be postponed. I'll talk about that very shortly, and let me know your thoughts on this wildcard team down in the comment section below. I'm also going to list some alternatives as we go along. Let's get this video to over 300 likes and we're on the road to 15,000 subscribers. We're making some incredible strides in the last week or so thank you very much, and let's keep on pushing and let's get straight into this video. As we discussed in yesterday's reaction stream, the 3 games that are postponed include Brighton vs Palace, Man United vs Leeds, and Chelsea vs Liverpool. Every other game will be going ahead unless something else happens in the next few days, which I wouldn't rule out, but most likely we're going to get 7 games this weekend in game week 8, and these 3 games and these 6 teams will subsequently blank, and it does make things a bit tricky. We do have a lot of Chelsea and Liverpool players, most of us. We do have maybe a few United players, and also some of these Brighton and Palace players like Zaha, Gross, Sanchez, etc. So it does make things a bit trickier, but it's still possible to navigate, and I'm seeing a lot of people talk about using the free hit, and whilst it might be applicable for some of you, I would try not to use the free hit if you can, because we're going to get a lot of doubles and potentially blanks in a short space of time around game weeks 29 to 34. That is a possibility, so I would try to recommend to not go and use the free hit and instead use the wild card or use free transfers and possibly a hit or two, but don't overdo it in my opinion for game week 8, where the ceiling could be lower this week with all of these teams blanking. But that's kind of the big update, and now you should all be aware about that. Let's now go into the best wildcard team. In goal, I would go for Nick Pope and also for Ward. I wouldn't overcomplicate it here. And normally I've been talking about 3 goalkeepers to narrow it down to, with Sanchez also being included in that conversation. Well, now I would just limit it to Nick Pope or Dean Henderson, and Danny Ward is your second goalkeeper. I know some people always talk about the possibility of having maybe 2 of these options, so Dean Henderson and Nick Pope. I think that's far too much money to spend on your goalkeepers, and just have one and stick to it. Nick Pope is a great option up until the unlimited transfers we get heading into the World Cup, so very happy with that. I wouldn't overcomplicate it. If you want maybe someone a bit cheaper, I would go for Dean Henderson, who has some good fixtures as well, and even though he might not get so many clean sheets, he can still get some save points, and he's very good in terms of saving penalties. So these are the 2 goalkeepers I'd go for. Let me know if you have any other opinions, or maybe a few other goalkeepers you want to throw at me. Based on the first 6 game weeks of the season so far, I think big at the back is probably a bit too much when we're talking about having 5 premium defenders, or those costing from 5.5 million and above. I don't think that is the way to go. So I would go for someone like Nico Williams around 4 million. He's 4.1 right now. And I wouldn't recommend having Nico Williams and Dean Henderson, although you won't be starting both of them every single week together. But with Nick Pope, I think that shouldn't be an issue. I know some people have raised concerns about having Nick Pope and Trippier, but the reason why I like both of them is because, yes, Newcastle's defensive underlying numbers aren't very good, but what they do have, Trippier and Pope, are the bonus points, and in Trippier's case, he has attacking potential with the free kicks. He can also get the odd assist here and there, and Nick Pope is very good, not only in terms of bonus points, but also in terms of saves, and that's why I've gone for the double up here. You don't need to start them every single week. When Newcastle have a tough fixture, you could just bench Trippier and start Nick Pope, and you never know, Newcastle could cause some problems and even possibly keep a clean sheet anyway. Cancelo is kind of a no-brainer. He's the highest scoring defender this season. Yes, he might not have been that impressive so far in terms of attacking returns or the underlying numbers, but I still think he's right up there and probably the best defender to own in the game right now. And City still have some good games coming up despite a few tough fixtures like Arsenal and Liverpool on the horizon. Then you've got Reece James, who's got really good long-term fixtures, and let's see how Chelsea do under their new manager. I wouldn't be looking to double up on Chelsea defence yet, but if they are starting to look promising, you could go for a double up with Fofana or Cucurella/Chilwell, depending on who is the main starting left wing back. But we know Reece James will be starting most games, if not all, and I think he is just one of the best options in defence. And then Emerson Royale, he is the kind of safer pick compared to Perisic, who I really like as an option, to be fair. But if he starts today against Sporting Lisbon, then I'd be very concerned about Perisic starting in the Premier League at the weekend. So it's up to you. You could go for Perisic, especially if you have the funds, but you also have to stomach the benchings, which are inevitable at this point. In the midfield, I would go for something like this. With Martinelli, in my opinion, he is the best option around that price and below, especially with Brighton blanking in game week 8. And not only that, they have no manager right now, and Graham Potter's impact, his departure, could be quite severe on Brighton's aspirations this season. So Martinelli, despite some poor fixtures coming up for Arsenal, I still think he can tick along nicely, and he's one of the best options. He's a template pick, and he speaks for himself. Jarrod Bowen is an interesting one. He's not actually got a return this season so far, apart from the Conference League where he scored a penalty when Declan Rice, Lucas Paqueta and all the others were on the pitch. So it does look like Bowen will be the main penalty taker, and he's got some great fixtures coming up. However, it's very difficult for me to really recommend him and say, you know what, I think he's going to do a great job, because we haven't really seen it enough. He has shown signs of improvement in the last few games, but it's still not the Bowen of last season. And I'll be honest, I do prefer James Maddison, but he is facing Tottenham this week. So you could go for Bowen for now. And if he doesn't improve in the next few weeks, you can move to James Maddison, who for me is the best option around his price and below, other than maybe Zaha. I think those two are my favourite medium price midfielders. Then we've gone for De Bruyne here, and he's obviously going to be starting. He's even a good captaincy option against Wolves. He scored a hat-trick in this fixture last season. Maybe I don't expect the same level of performance there, but he still should be a great option. And you could even go for Heung-min Son. He's a great captaincy option against Leicester, who are the worst team in the league right now. And Wilfried Zaha, he is blanking this week, but you can easily bench him, and you can start the other midfielders that you can see, including Andres Pereira away to Nottingham Forest, and I think that's the way to go. I'll show you how I would line up in game week 8, and that shouldn't be an issue. And in the weeks to come, you'll have the likes of Zaha and Reece James you can always bring into your 11, and it will strengthen you to another level. So I like this midfield a lot, and once again, you can go for Maddison instead of Bowen, especially after a week or two if Bowen and West Ham continue to struggle. I know Leicester are struggling even more so, but Maddison is still able to churn out these results with assists and goals because he's a quality player. So let me know what you think of this midfield, and if there's anything you would change. I know a lot of you are keen on Sterling, but it's impossible to fit everyone in this team, to be honest. You have to be selective and go with what you think is the best in terms of team structure. A lot of people may disagree, but I would go for Ivan Toney over Isaac. One thing you could do, a bit similar to the Bowen Maddison situation, is go for Isaac on the wild card, and then in a few weeks you can go for Ivan Toney. But I think in the long term, he is my preference, and I don't want to book in too many transfers with this wildcard team, and I'd rather go for Bowen over Maddison compared to Isaac over Toney, although you may disagree with that, and that's completely fine. Mitrovic is in here. I think these two medium price forwards, Toney and Mitrovic, offer insane value, and now I think is the time to go off the likes of Gabriel Jesus, who could do well against Brentford, but then he faces the likes of Tottenham, Liverpool and Man City in the space of 4 game weeks from game week 9. So I think it's a really good time to get off these Arsenal assets and maybe just limit it down to one player. And Martinelli is my favourite Arsenal option because of the value he offers. And then Erling Haaland speaks for himself. I know a lot of you will consider the possibility of going for Haaland and Kane up front, and maybe that will mean going down from De Bruyne, or perhaps having a freemium draft, but I think that would be far too imbalanced. So really, it's up to you. Do you go for De Bruyne or for Harry Kane? I don't think there's a right or wrong answer here. And whilst Kane has been slightly better so far this season, I would actually rather go for De Bruyne, because once the likes of Son and Salah start picking up form, you'd like to move to these options. And it's much easier to do that if you go from De Bruyne rather than then taking a -4 hit, potentially, or more in the weeks to come to get rid of a premium attacker like Kane to then get these premium midfielders. But then again, I could be wrong, and it could be the year of the premium forwards, Harry Kane and Haaland, and it could continue until the end of the season, of course. But I do like this structure, and once again, you can make a few changes here and there depending on your preference. But just to kind of recap, in terms of alternatives for every single position, in goal, I would say Dean Henderson and no one else for now. Robert Sanchez is obviously blanking in game week 8, and I don't want to play Ward against Tottenham. In terms of defenders, I would still recommend considering Trent, but the fixtures are poor. He's 7.5 million, and he's just not really living up to the hype. Then you've got Perisic if you want someone who's going to get more points than Emerson when he starts, but the starts will be few and far between compared to the Brazilian. Saliba's a good option around 4.8 million, and then you've got Emerson from West Ham, who's around 4 million, but Creswell is back from injury, so he is not going to be the most nailed option, and maybe you could go for Patterson instead if you are looking for another 4 million option compared to Nico Williams. In terms of midfielders, I would consider the likes of Son and Salah, as always. I think they will start to pick up form. Then you've got Raheem Sterling around 10 million. I prefer him over Bruno Fernandes. Let's see how Chelsea perform under their new manager, and how will Sterling coexist with Aubameyang, because they do operate in similar areas. Then there's Bowen, who I mentioned as well. Gross around 5.9 million. Bailey, who's probably the second best option for me, around 4.7 million and below, with Andreas being my favourite. I think it's a bit easier to bench as well. And then we've got Rashford, who is still a great option, and most of his braces, 5 of his 7 braces in the Premier League, have come against top 6 opposition. So despite the tough fixtures for United, I still think that Rashford can produce some returns, even more so than he would against the weaker teams. And then in terms of the forwards, Gabriel Jesus is still a great option and someone you could consider in the wild card, but I'd actually rather consider the likes of Kane and Isaac if you were not to go for this front three that you see on screen. And now let me show you how it would look like in Game Week 8 in terms of the captaincy and the bench, and you wouldn't have any issues whatsoever despite the 6 teams blanking. According to FPL.team, this has a predicted points of 49, which is relatively low, but I actually think it could score even higher this week. It's a good team. You've got Nick Pope and Trippier at home to Bournemouth. I think that could be a clean sheet there easily, and also some bonus points for at least one of those two players. Then you've got Joao Cancelo away to Wolves. I think that's a good fixture from a defensive point of view. Wolves struggle to score goals. I think they've scored 2 goals this season so far, so I wouldn't be too concerned about Cancelo. Emerson's at home to Leicester, and from a defensive point of view, it's not the easiest fixture, but I think Emerson could even get an attack in return. I wouldn't be surprised by that whatsoever, and if Perisic starts, for example, and you go for him, then I'd be very, very confident of some attacking returns for the Croatian. Then you've got Andres Pereira, De Bruyne, Maddison and Martinelli in the midfield. I think that looks pretty solid, and in most weeks you won't be starting Andres Pereira. It's just for this week, where you could also go for Nico Williams instead, to be fair, but I would rather go for Andres Pereira and put all my eggs in the Fulham basket. De Bruyne is a great captaincy option even, but I wouldn't captain Haaland and vice-captain De Bruyne, just in case the game doesn't go ahead for some reason. I always try to have that at the back of my mind and vice-captain a player from a different team. In this case, it's Mitrovic up front, away to Nottingham Forest. I think he's a great option, even better than Tony and Isaac, I'd say. And if it weren't for Kane and Haaland, I think Mitrovic would be the best forward option this week, to be honest. And around his price, you can't really complain. And he's only going to go up in price. He's going to get more points and goals. And he's going to be a fabulous option until the end of the season. And in terms of the bench, you've got Nico Williams first sub, just in case you need it. Obviously, you've got Danny Ward there as your second goalkeeper as well. And then Zaha and Reece James are both blanking. And you can always bring them back in for Game Week 9, where they have some good fixtures. Obviously, they're facing each other, to be fair. But after that, both Palace and Chelsea have some great games coming up. So let me know what you think of this Game Week 8 wildcard team. Is there anything you would change? I know some of you are seriously considering Son over De Bruyne. That's fair enough. And some of you are even considering a different structure and going for 2 premium forwards, including Harry Kane. And I think that's completely fine. It's good to have different opinions and going for different players and structures as well. But if I were wildcarding in Game Week 8, which is a possibility actually, and I'll talk about this in the team selection video, I could actually wildcard to something like this. But thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video or found it useful, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe if you're new. Let's get this video to over 300 likes, and we're very close to 15,000 subscribers. It'd be much appreciated, and all of your support is going a long way to helping the channel. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and you can also become a patron or a channel member. The links are in the description below, and you can also join the Discord server and the FPL League. All of that good stuff is there. So I wish you all the best of luck for Game Week 8 and the rest of the season, and I'll see you next time.